Hello and welcome back to Monument Cycling. I'm Owen Lake. I'm joined by Harry Johnson. Harry, how's it going?
Not too bad. Today we're going to take a very brief overview, look back on the season that we've just had, 2024. We'll look at the National Series road races and the National Series crits. We'll look at who won each, how each race played out, and then who won the overalls and what we think about that. Firstly, Owen, what is the National Series? What is the difference between the crit and the road race? And where does it sit in the world of cycling?
Okay, so if you've been living under a rock and you have no idea, the National Series is British cycling's highest level of racing in the discipline. There's a National Series for each discipline, but the ones that we are most interested in, through bias, through what we're talking about here, road racing and criterium racing. I also do the National Trophy Series as well, so the cyclocross. That's like a really... it's one that we cover a lot of on Monument Cycling. But today I think we're going to talk mainly about the other two. British Cycling, of course, being the national governing body, but the races are run by individual organisers and they're all part of the series. You know, they come under the same banner, but they get a little bit of flexibility in how they run because it's an individual organiser who's in charge of it.
There we go. Nicely put. So it's the top level of racing in the UK. Underneath, of course, the races like Tour of Britain. Although if it keeps going on like it's going at the moment, they're not going to be that level anyway. So give it a couple of years and it definitely will be the top level of sport in the UK. Or top level of cycling. So this year, I was looking back through some articles on the British Continental. Very lovely shout out there for Denny. A good place for any info to keep up to date about the British scene. But I was looking back at the calendar at the start of the year from the article of kind of announcing the series, and it's a pretty sorry looking image. The Tour of the Reservoir, the Tour of the Res, disappeared. There was talks of having the Manx stage race on the Isle of Man, but that was gone after being cancelled last year. They said it was going to be back 2024, but it wasn't, unfortunately. So 2 great stage races gone from this year. Don't know where they lie for next year, but hopefully we see them again. And there was also, British Cycling also announced there was going to be another National Series kind of event at the end of September. That never happened. So we only had 6 events for the women, 6 one-day races, including the Cycle Classic at the start of the year. And for the men we had 5, because their Cycle Classic is a UCI event. It's not part of the National Series. But we'll start with the road racing. So it did start with the Cycle Classic for the women. You were at that event, Owen. How did that play out? How did you see that event?
Cycle Classic is always mad. You know, it is the OG gravel racing. You know, you have farm tracks, you've got these narrow kind of broken road single track lanes, like standard roads, you know, in the UK. But then you send 100 riders down it, 150 riders down it, and it is hectic. If it's raining, if it's like a little bit damp, it just becomes this bun fight. Everything you might think of for like the Tour of Flanders or Paris-Roubaix, it's all of that, but on these crazy windy roads in the UK.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. We talked last week that, you know, we go out for our rides. Everyone goes out for their rides on these country lanes and they think this would be great for a spring classic. And Cycle does a great job of actually doing that. It's amazing that it's been around for so long. So the 2024 Cycle Classic with the women was won in an 8-woman group at the end in a breakaway. I'm pretty sure the race, I remember watching this live, the race just kind of blew apart as soon as it hit. What's the main kind of climb? Up
Summerberg. Summerberg is like a gravel 2.2 kilometer gravel climb or something. It's absolutely savage. Yeah. It's just a farm track.
Yeah, it's the kind of the race orbits around that really. I think they go up at 2 or 3 or 4 times depending on what the race is and what distance every year. But yeah, it just blew apart there, and then it was pretty much single file, single groups after that. But it was won by Elened
King, yep.
Elened King on Life Plus Wahoo. Ailey Shaw, a name we'll be talking about a lot, second with Alice McWilliam rounding out the podium. A really good, entertaining race with Lucy Harris in 8th, who would eventually take the leader of the National Series. She'd be wearing that jersey for the majority of the races, but didn't quite hang on to it to the end of the year. But we'll be talking about those names quite a bit going over this. Jessica Finney, previous winner, she was 12th and a minute 41 back. So the gaps from 9th to 10th was only a couple of seconds, but then from 10th to 11th was a minute 41, which is quite a big gap for only the top 11. But yeah, great event. Did it kind of play out as you thought it would?
In a way, yeah, because you always expect it to just blow apart. I think we've become quite used to nowadays in the women's race having this depleted front group. Like it splits quite early, coalesces around a few groups, and then that front group working together quite well to go to the end. Like they know, okay, cool, if we work together, this is it, this is the race sewn up. And I think because you get so tired, it drains you so much. There aren't too many massive attacks that break the bunch up, that front group. So you end up with a breakaway sprint effectively, which is great. Like it's really kind of really thrilling stuff, which is nice.
And it was pretty traditional weather, wasn't it? It wasn't blue skies and dry, was it?
No. I remember it used to. So the men's race happens in April, and it is always contended with terrible weather. And of course, this year, the men's race actually got cancelled because of the weather. The women's race used to take place, I think, in June or July, and wonderful. Like it's tough, but it's dry. It switched to that March position, and the teams and the riders were like, "Sorry, what?" And it is an absolute mess for the riders, but a delight for people watching it. That's kind of what we want to see. We want to see people battling it out, duking it out, and that's what we get every year now. Yeah,
I mean, we normally go on to talk about the men's, but yeah, as you said, one of the biggest stories from this year, we all saw the pictures and the videos of people playing cricket in the warm-up, because it was initially delayed by like 15 minutes and half an hour, and then we saw the pictures of the flooding and kind of knew what was happening and knew what was going to happen, and then it was cancelled, which is a massive shame. It's the biggest one-day race in the UK, has been for a couple of years now. It's the only UCI race, super important event for UK cycling. So it's something completely out of the control of organisers. A massive amount of money and time that's been put into that, but hopefully it's back 2025. Get your wellies.
That's what we've been hearing. Yep.
Get your wellies and go down and watch it. And then it was a bit of a gap to the second event, the East Clevedon road race. Men and the women, same day, which will be for the rest of the events. It's only the Sickle that has them on separate days.
Mm-hmm.
The men, I was commentating on these events, so I've actually seen these pretty much in their entirety. It was a while ago, but I'll do my best to remind myself. Eventually won by Rowan Baker after going solo. He was with a couple of teammates who he dropped off the back after they were away on their own for quite a while. Super attacking race. Obviously it's got that famous climb going up to the finish. That was the national champs last year, 2023.
This year as well. They had a deal with them, so it's been a few years now. I don't know if they're doing it next year there as well. We'll see.
Not too sure, but it's got that famous on the coast next to the sea, super steep climb with a hairpin at the bottom. But yeah, Rowan Baker, kind of after St. Piran's great performance in 2023, we were like, okay, it's going to be more of the same this year. But didn't end up turning out like that. So we had Tim Shawman from Wheelbase Cab Deck in second, with James McKay, a new signing for St. Piran in 2024, in third. How did you find the men's race at East Clevedon?
I had mixed feelings at the time. Now looking back, much happier. So at the time, I was concerned that St. Piran were just going to smash the entire season again. You know, we've just come off of 2023 where they won like every single round. And they were absolutely unstoppable. They've lost their best riders. They've all gone up to World Tour or Pro Tour. And then along comes like one of their newer riders, one of the next generation, and he's suddenly smashing everyone. I was worried. Now looking back, I'm like, wow, that was an incredible ride. He was so strong, and it kind of defied the odds because you were watching it and you were thinking, okay, cool, this guy's been out up the road for a long time. He's it's not an easy course, and there are a lot of places where if you're sitting in the bunch, you can kind of preserve some energy. So Rowan Baker's out there for a long time, and then he ends up going solo with like a lap to go or something. He still ends up winning by like 90 seconds. It's mega impressive and a really good course for good racing. Because behind him, you've got this big gap, but behind him, you've got this like mad fight for position. You've got sprints up Saltburn Bank. I looking back on it now, I'm really happy with that race. It is really, really good one to watch.
Yeah, it was a difficult one to commentate on for the last kind of 40 minutes, as we just had lovely live images of Rowan Baker on his own. But yeah, incredibly impressive, as well as Tim Shawman there. He's does quite well in the crits that we'll see in a bit. So for him to pull that out was really impressive. Harry Mack as well in 7th for Tap Callas, an elite team, kind of brushing shoulders with some really experienced names there. Will Perrett up there as well in 6th. Ollie Rees racing a lot in Portugal, racing for a Portuguese team this year. We'll also mention him later. But yeah, a really hard start to the season. For the men. Over in the women, we had Kat Ferguson crashing with a lap to go.
Yeah.
Kind of disappearing from our commentary. We thought we'd just lost her. Couldn't really see her, and then she just popped up on the final climb on a spare bike and sprinted away to win. She'd already signed for Movistar at that point, so it wasn't kind of like a hidden rider, but any junior winning that level of race is crazy impressive. And our teammate Imogen in 3rd as well, sandwiching Ailey Shaw in 2nd place for Alba. So we've got a junior rider winning, under 23 2nd, and a junior rider 3rd, which is pretty crazy for a National Series race. What can you remember about how this played out?
Just like you said, it's we saw Kat Ferguson attacks on lap 1 up Saltburn Bank, and I remember asking her afterwards, like, what were you doing? This is lap 1 of a National Series race, and she just got excited, got carried away, which you expect from junior racing. Often people will say, we were racing like juniors, and it just means we were smashing it off the front, attacking at every opportunity, and it doesn't usually work. But then she's calmed it down, recovered, looking in a good position, crashes, chases back on a spare bike that she's never ridden before, is barely set up for her, and then demolishes everyone that final time up Saltburn Bank. As you said, we already knew she was really good. Like, she's already at that point a champion. She's already incredible in the junior ranks. But going up against it, being able to fight under pressure at a higher level than hers, like, I think it's pretty damn impressive, and showed that not only is she ready to step up in the future, she's ready to step up now.
I think there's a misconception that some of these junior riders you see come up through the ranks quite quickly, like Tom Pidcock, Josh Charling, and then you see Kat Ferguson doing the same. You kind of look at the result sheet here and think, she was just stronger than everyone else. She's developing a little bit quicker. She's got the support from the World Tour teams. There's kind of no thought, just attack loads and sprint up the hill and win. But watching the race, the whole Shibden Apex team, despite all being juniors, raced extremely well, just from a tactics and maturity point of view. They didn't win it because they were the strongest, although they probably were as well. They won it because they raced really well. And I think the only kind of little bit of show of weakness was that crash with a lap to go, maybe a little bit of inexperience. just sliding out. I don't think there was anything else involved. She just slid out on one of the corners coming into the finish. But yeah, super impressive from that whole team. And obviously now we know Kat Ferguson has done very well on Movistar, winning already, and double world champion. Anna Imogen's moving to Visma World Tour team. Then we moved on to the Rafa Lincoln Grand Prix, massive event in the UK. If Sickle Cycle Classic is the biggest one-day race in the UK, Lincoln is definitely second. It's the biggest all-on-road. Although it's not really all-on-road, is it? Why is it not all-on-road, Owen?
Cobbles in the heart of Lincoln. Absolute mad race. It is our answer to a Belgian kermesse, the Tour of Flanders, and you have a 200 or 300 metre stretch of cobbles in the middle of Lincoln that is maybe 15 to 20%, and it's havoc, absolute havoc. That's what we like. That's what we like about it, and I think it's the enduring popularity of it, isn't it?
Exactly. There's a massive positional battle that first couple of laps to be one of the first riders up there. I mean, if you're 80th, 90th going up that climb for the first time, you've got no chance. You're going to be like 2 minutes back. You have to do a massive chase in the descent. The rest of the circuit is actually quite flat. It's not like East Clevedon where there's loads of kind of rolling hills through the countryside. It's pretty flat or downhill for the rest of the lap. So it's not necessarily a climber's race, despite the main piece. This year in the open race, we did have a breakaway. There was a bit of drama with a lap to go when Alex Richardson stuck his hands up thinking that he'd won. We were wondering on the comms why he was doing such a massive effort with a lap to go, and then he stuck his hands up thinking that he'd won. Didn't hear the bell, or maybe he did hear the bell then, and then he went away in a 2-up with Adam Lewis for a little bit, but eventually he paid for his effort, and Matt Holmes won. Comeback ride. There was a lot of talk around Matt Holmes before the race. There was a good article with British Continental talking about his return, and he did very well to win that with Adam Lewis in second. Matt King from X-Speed United. If you've seen Matt King, then you'll know what I was talking about when I said it's not necessarily a race for the climbers. He does not look like a climber.
None of them are. Alex Richardson, who is a previous winner of the race, he's strong. I think when he was younger, he was into weight training and stuff like that. He's a strong guy. Matt King's a strong guy. Even Matt Holmes you're more likely to see him in the Team GB pursuit squad than you are to see him, on a mountainous race. Although, to be fair, I think he once wore the King of the Mountains in Paris-Nice or something like that. So he's a pretty strong rider.
Yeah. I mean, Matt Holmes and Adam Lewis is definitely a climber. I don't think he'd be.
But then you've got George Kimber as well. So I think that's one of the great things about Lincoln. It gives an opportunity for all those different types of riders to duke it out, and actually all of them have a chance of winning, depending on how they play their cards in that specific race.
Yeah, and we saw that play out as a massive tactical battle. We saw a great attack from George Kimber at the end, although he didn't quite have the legs to hold them off up the final climb. But yeah, George Kimber fourth. I think this was the race that he went into the lead of the National Series. So he put on that white jersey with the funky logo on the front. But behind those 5 that eventually made it to the finish, it was only 13 seconds back from 5th to 6th to David Hurd for Cycling Sheffield. Great ride. Tom Williams pops up in 7th, and Ollie Rees again racing for Sabgal, Portuguese team. So we'll see the same sort of names pop up over and over again, even though the races are quite different. For this series you need quite a lot of experience. You need to tie it all together. But yeah, great event as always in Lincoln. Over in the women's race, we had Kate Richardson from Life Plus Wahoo, Kat Ferguson again in second with Shibden Apex race team, and again her teammate Imogen in third. How did that race play out, Owen?
It looked like it was going to be a sprint. I think Kat Ferguson's team, Shibden Apex, were drilling it for a sprint, setting her up for the final climb. And then suddenly, Life Plus Wahoo play a blinder. They only had 3 people in the race, I think. Kate Richardson goes with 1 lap to go and goes solo and holds it all the way to the line. You know, it's touch and go. You don't think a solo rider can go with 1 lap to go against the whole bunch on what is essentially a flat course, barring the finale. But Kate Richardson held it all the way, and super impressive. Was an example of how you can ride against people trying to set it up for a sprint finish at Lincoln Grand Prix.
Yeah, this was definitely, if we look at the open race, and it was Matt Holmes being the strongest eventually on that final climb. Even though they were kind of throwing attacks, it was a strength win. He was stronger than everyone else. The women's was a tactical win, and it was played perfectly. Used all of the kind of stereotype catchphrases. They kept the powder dry, didn't burn any matches. They didn't do anything all race. They just kept hidden. Even though being a bigger team, you know, there might be an opportunity for them to be lent on to do more work. They didn't. There's only 3 of them. They were smart. And they set up one attack at the end, perfectly timed, and stayed away.
Yeah.
It was only 13 seconds as well that she held it to the line. Shibden went 2nd, 3rd and 4th, which, again, crazy impressive for a bunch of juniors. Kate Richardson as well is under 23, so we had under 23, junior, junior, junior. So the young riders are dominating the National Series at this point for the women. And Lucy, I think this was also the race that Lucy Harris took the leader's jersey, because she was 8th again, so she went 8th, 10th, 8th. And Ailey Shaw, I don't think raced Lincoln or crashed out. I can't quite remember, but she wasn't. She definitely didn't finish.
Feature. Yeah.
So there was a. I'm sure she can let us know. Next up, we had Lancaster in the north of England, on the coast. It's very windy, very hilly, kind of proper British racing, hard, grippy roads. And it was won by Ben Granger, who is based out in Italy, rides for an Italian Conti team that has seen quite a few riders kind of go through into the World Tour. But he held off James McKay for St. Piran's. He's popping up again on the podium. And George Kimber in 3rd for Spirit, wearing the leader's jersey. And Finn McHenry as an under-23 in 4th. So we see the women's dominated by the younger riders. The open race is being dominated by the senior riders at the moment. How did this race play out, Owen?
This was an interesting one. So you've got, again, the stronger teams there, but Matt Holmes is going into it because his dad actually organises this race. So you've got someone like Matt Holmes is gunning for it. You're in the middle of the National Circuit Series, so you've got some fatigue in the legs. For me, George Kimber was the big surprise because I'm thinking of him as a big, strong guy. You know, more akin to winning Lincoln than he is Lancaster. But Ben Granger, you know, if you have to pick somebody, it's probably going to be the guy racing out in Italy a lot of the time. And he took a flyer not too far from the finish, and nobody could catch him. Guy was absolutely hooning it, came flying into Lancaster on his own, and won by a good margin in the end. Really, really impressive ride.
Yeah, 30 seconds back to James McKay and George Kimber, who looked like they sprinted it out. Looking at this result sheet, it looks very different to the previous 2 races that we've had for the men. There's names here that I haven't seen. George Pedden for Team PB Performance. He's a very strong rider, but he hasn't popped up too much this year so far. How does Lancaster differ from the 2 races that we've seen already, that we've looked at already?
It is really hard. It is Lancaster and Rydale probably battle it out for the 2 hardest circuits on the calendar. And if you are having a bad day, you're screwed. Like if you don't have your climbing legs with you, you're screwed. Like it is an unforgiving course, and I think that's where it really differs. East Cleveland is hard, but nowhere near as hard as the Lancaster Grand Prix. You know, and Lincoln, again, it's hard, but it's hard for this set piece. Lancaster is just hard the whole day.
I can kind of see that from the amount of DNF. So we only had 64 finishers. So it looks like there was more DNFs than there were finishes, which is always a good sign that it was a fun day out for those involved. Over in the women's, we had Frankie Hall pop up for a win for Das Hutchinson Brother UK. A few seconds back to Lauren Dixon from Edinburgh, and then Tamsin Miller again for Das Hatchton, and Das Hatchton again in fourth with Lucy Lee. So 3 out of the top 4. A massive display from Das. Looks like this race was a little bit closer. How did this one play out?
Yeah, this was good. The top 3 came into it largely together, and they were sort of like getting a little bit cagey, you know, and looking at each other and not wanting to commit too much. And it came down to like the gap went out, and suddenly, you know, when they're battling out for the win, the gap's coming down. The 3 of them are sort of like ebbing and flowing, such that by the end, the gaps are really tight, and you're like, oh my god, can they actually stay away? Because that final kilometre is up a tough climb. And I think the second and third positions switched with like 100 metres to go, you know. So like Lancaster giveth and it taketh away.
Exactly, but a massive win for Frankie. We see her pop up. She races super aggressively.
Too aggressively, man.
Yeah, I think too aggressively. But I mean, you can't really. Yeah, there's nothing you can say when she wins. Like, she did quite well. Yeah, similar sort of names up in the top. Ailey Shaw in 9th, bagging some more points for the series. Molly Patch up there. Caitlin Dimbleby up there. Lucy Harris in 14th. Yeah. Maybe not as many points for the series as she would have liked, but still up there grabbing them. But yeah, as soon as you kind of drop back a little bit, so that 6th place was 2 minutes behind the winner. So yeah, again speaks to how hard that course is. Next up, moving towards the end of the season. Where are we now at Rydale? About in the year, when was Rydale?
It's the 18th of August. I remember because it was the week before Cambridge.
18th of August, so it's getting near. You know, maybe not desperate, but for some riders are like, okay, it's time to step up and actually get some results now. The series leaderboards are kind of set, and you've got your main protagonists that are there, Kimber and Lucy Harris leading them. Rydale, what's the Rydale circuit like? Obviously, we've all seen the pictures kind of on the estate of it rising up through past the house through that narrow little kind of country road up the hill. But what's the circuit and the finish like?
Okay, so Rydale is split into a large circuit and a small circuit, and they're both horrible. They are up and down the whole time. There's barely any flat, and on really tight, narrow roads as well. So you can imagine if you're at the front, brilliant. You just like slide into this corner, glide up the hill. If you're at the back, it's a single track lane with gravel on it, and you're just suddenly going up a 15% climb. So you're on the brakes into the corner, and then you're trying to do this insane sprint up the climb, chasing after the leaders. It's very unforgiving. It's very hard. The large lap is I think 3 major climbs, and then the smaller lap is just like climb after climb after climb. You know, and as you said, you go through Ampleforth Abbey, switchbacks through the Abbey grounds. It's an incredibly scenic race. It's an incredibly hard one to actually race.
And for the men, this is pretty much the closest thing you'll get to a bunch sprint in National Series road racing at the moment with the circuits that we've got. There were 22 riders that went to the finish almost together before a 4-minute gap back to 23rd. And the kick was won by Tom Williams, under-23 rider for Scott Redding's race team, which almost disappeared for this year, but thankfully for the scene and for the riders, found a few sponsors right at the end of 2023 to continue for 2024, backed up by Matt Holmes in 2nd and Rowan Baker in 3rd after his win at Eve Clevedon for St Piran, and then Dylan Wesley for St Piran as well in 4th. Just looking down the result sheet, again, it's the same sort of riders that we see again. George Kimber in 10th, grabbing some more points. Only 1 position behind James McKay. I'm not sure if this race or it was a few races after this. Or I think there's only 1 race after this anyway, isn't there? But James McKay was kind of chasing George Kimber for the majority of the series. They were kind of 1st and 2nd, with only a few points separating them every race. So for them to finish 9th and 10th in the bunt kick is pretty funny. I imagine they were marking each other a little bit. But Alex Peters, if you've been in the scene for a while, you'll know the name Alex Peters. was on Sky for a little bit before coming back to the UK. Had a few years off, and then has been racing again for the last few years. I remember Alex Peters because he had an argument with a race comm at a race I was at in front of everyone whilst we were shivering on the start line whilst he was getting DQ'd, which was quite funny.
Yeah. Alex is I spent 3 months with him in Gran Canaria in Spain training the year that he ended up going pro with Team Sky. Dude's absolute machine. When he's on the ball, I mean, when he was at his peak, unstoppable on the British scene. Nowadays, he can always roll out of bed, and that saying, what is it? Form is temporary, class is forever. Like, that's Alex.
Yeah, and he's shown that there with the fifth in the sprint. Tyler Hannay went on to win a stage in China at UCI race. Really talented young rider for St. Piran. Over in the women's, we had Das Hutchinson again win with Lucy Lee after a good performance at Lancaster. Lauren Dixon again in second for Alba Development, and then Frankie again popping up again in third, with Caitlin popping up in fourth, Ailey Shaw in fifth. So these are all names that have been pretty much up there in the top 10 every race, just in a slightly different order. But this was a breakaway that went to the finish, wasn't
it? In the women's race, I don't know, honestly. I can't remember.
It was. So there's 10 of them that went to the line, it looks like, and then a couple of minutes back to 11th, 12th, 13th. But yeah, super impressive from Lucy. Have you spoken to Lucy? What's she like?
She once called herself a sprinter. And then she's going and winning some of the hilliest climbs, hilliest races. She's really cool, really good rider. Once pigeonholed herself into sprinter time trials, and now she's kind of been given the wings to fly, and she can win anything if she puts her mind to it, really.
Yeah, I'd like to see a sprinters race. We used to have Stockton in the UK, which was kind of the only sprinters race for a little bit in the UK that was somewhat flat, where you could actually control it a little bit and then sprint at the end. There's not really that opportunity anymore. You kind of have to be a climber that can finish it off from a small group. So it'd be nice if we can get back to that eventually.
Yeah, I don't know where it would be. I think if Stockton could come back, that would be nice. I mean, I guess the races for the sprinters that we get really are the National Circuit Series, aren't they? Which is kind of a very well, I say British thing. You obviously get crits everywhere, but the fact that it's like the National Road Series is seemingly the preserve of like rulers and climbers, and then the National Circuit Series is where the sprinters can shine.
Right, it's come around quick, as it did come around quick in the season, to the final National Series road race of the year. So we had George Kimber going into it in the lead. We had Ailey Shaw going into the lead in the women's leading jersey. Kimber had been leading basically the whole time. Ailey had taken it off Lucy Harris, I think in the last race, maybe the race before it. In the open race, so in the two races are called two different things. The men's is the Beaumont Trophy. The women's is the Curlew.
That's correct.
Curlew Cup. What is the circuit like, Owen?
It is very tough, centered around the set piece of the Riles climb, which is, double-digit gradients, long climb. It's just like a drag as well. Like it's just like dead. You come into it dead straight, then it's a wall in front of you, goes up in a few steps, and it's open enough that you can still get like crosswinds coming across, and imagine getting put in the gutter on a 15% climb. It's not very nice. So it's a very tough race.
That sounds grippy.
Very grippy, yeah. If you had to describe it in one word, it's grippy.
Every word in the UK is grippy.
Yeah.
Every race in the UK is grippy. This one, similar to Tom Williams' win, where it's kind of an almost independent rider. Well, not independent, but not one of the massive teams that turn up to these races. Was won by Ollie Rees, riding for Sabgal over in Portugal. So he definitely was on his own for this race. He didn't have any teammates. So super impressed for him. It looked like it ended up just being kind of groups chasing each other, and then a very reduced breakaway sprint between 6 or 7 of them. Will Truelove for Scott Redding, so they had a great season, and then Tom Armstrong for Wheelbase out of Scotland, with Alex Ball, under 23, for Project One cycling team in 4th. Do you remember how this race turned out? Did you have a chat to Ollie afterwards?
Yeah, so Ollie's, he'd been knocking on the door. You've already mentioned his name a few times, top 10s repeatedly. He'd been knocking on the door. And it's one of those races because you've still got the National Series overall in mind. So George Kimber's, fighting for that. And the National Series leader is always one of the strongest riders in the race. So what are they focusing on? What's their team focusing on? And it gives people like Ollie Rees an opportunity to race for the win because he can play off the other power dynamics in that race, which he did very well.
That's definitely an interesting point that you've brought up there. Is that the dynamics of this race are very different from the kind of the first 2, 3, 4 races. Even though it's only the 2 riders that were fighting for the win at this point, it was George Kimber and James McKay for St. Piran. It doesn't take just those 2 riders kind of racing differently. You've also got all of St. Piran are going to be behind James McKay racing for that overall win, and all of Spirit TBW are going to be behind George Kimber. So that's kind of 10, 11, 12 riders that are all racing for just the overall and just one rider. So it's not kind of like the free-for-all that you might see at some of the other races. But we had George Kimber eventually finish 10th. Again, 1 position behind James McKay in 9th, which was enough to hold on to the overall series by 9 points, I think it was. Interesting though, Dylan Wesley, St. Piran, was sick in the breakaway. Not sure why he was there. Maybe should have been helping out his teammate behind, but oh well.
He's just like, I've got to get this Tour of Britain spot or something like that.
Maybe.
No, it's after the Tour of Britain, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah. I mean, if you're used to watching cycling on the TV on Eurosport, why didn't the team car just talk to him? Why didn't they just talk on the radios? There is definitely no radios in a race like this. It's very much, you're out on your own. So either of them just might have not known what was happening, but pretty interesting there. Again, same sort of names that were cropping up. So a really good end to the year for the open race. For the women, we had Robin Clay win with Das Hutchinson, Ailey Shaw again in 2nd with Alba Development, and then Esther Wong with Shibden Apex Race Team. So it's the same teams popping up, same riders. How did this race play out? It looked like there was the time gaps are pretty small here compared to the men's. It looks almost like a 23-woman sprint at the end there.
Yeah, so Beaumont's an odd one. If you have a headwind or like a head cross going up the rails, it really deadens a lot of the attacks and it makes it very hard to get away because you want to attack on the rails, get a gap and then attack and follow that through over the top of the climb. But if you've got a headwind there, or a headwind coming into the finish, it can make it really tough to stay away. So often in the women's race, you get this, it's weird, you get a bunch sprint on one of the hardest courses. And in bunch sprints, we know Robin Clay is an incredibly strong rider. Ailey Shaw clearly has the form, but Robin is you wouldn't ever discount Robin in a bunch sprint, and she's got a really strong team backing her up.
Of course, I remember her kind of exploding onto the scene at Lincoln a couple of years ago, winning that as the underdog. That was a great race. If you want to go back and watch some old races, so for the overall National Road Series, so that was all the races that we just talked about for the women and the men, obviously including the cycle classic for the women. Ailey Shaw won it with 220 points in front of Lucy Harris for Pro Noctis, a mid-season transfer there for Lucy Harris to do the Tour of Britain, and then Esther Wong for Shibden Apex Race Team, Frankie Hall in 4th with Das Hutchinson. So again, it's these same names and teams that kind of pop up every year. Kat Ferguson only did a few races before going off, and some would say more important racing with a World Tour team, but we disagree. A World Champs, who cares about the World Champs? It's all about Rydale.
100%.
So yeah, super entertaining year from the women. For the open race where George Kimber holding on to that overall in front of James McKay, chasing him down. Again, 9 points separating them. And then Ollie Rees, super impressive to finish third on 149 points, racing basically on his own as an independent. So you've got no teammates closing down gaps. You can't bounce off each other. It's just you on your own. Matt Holmes ended up finishing fifth, kind of in his comeback year to National Road Series. Again, I don't think he did them all either, so impressive from him. The same names that were obviously popping up all year. Be interesting to see what they go on to do. What they go on to do next year. But what do you make of the Road Series overall in 2024, Owen? How does it compare to 2023?
It was pretty good. I mean, as I said right at the beginning, my whole worry was that St. Piran were just going to rock up, demolish everyone again. That didn't happen, so I'm happy. Nothing against St. Piran. I like them, and I like the team. I like the riders. But in terms of a scene and exciting racing, you don't want to watch one team demolish everyone. So I was really happy with it on the men's side. On the women's side, it was incredible to see like the rise of Ailey Shaw, her button heads with Kat Ferguson, the kind of the team dynamics as well. Even with Kat Ferguson, like you've got Imogen Wolf, you've got Esther Wong coming through, and like it's very nice to see the next generation coming through on the women's side. Really happy to see that.
Yeah, and I think in the men's, the open races, obviously after we had St. Piran in 2023, nothing against St. Piran, incredibly impressive, but it's not entertaining racing. It's not good for spectators. It doesn't create good racing. To see riders like Ben Granger and Ollie Rees, who have moved away from the UK, there's lots of talks about kind of developing riders moving away to Europe because they can't get the sort of racing in the UK. To come back to the UK and then be that competitive, winning these races, I think is really good. I think it looks good for the sport that they're coming back and racing in the UK and just talking really highly of it. I think that's how you get more people into it. But yeah, really open, competitive racing from everyone, and just incredibly impressive from George Kimber to win the overall. I mean, he works full time. Again, there was a really good interview on the British Continental interview with him, talking about how he balances that. But I mean, yeah, that's just crazy.
Yeah, George Kimber really surprised me this year in a really good way. And in fact, you were, I think we were going to speak who our favourite riders or most impressive riders were this season. And for me, on the road side, I think he is one of the most, if not the most impressive riders, because he has come so far. He's gone from being a rider that you think of just being, this is a big guy that can race flat races, to fighting out on every terrain, fighting out consistently across an entire series, and then coming out on top. He really stood out to me in that respect.
Yeah, so we said we were going to talk about the crits as well this year in this podcast. We're not going to do that because we've taken too long on the road races. They're just too interesting, Owen. It's just too entertaining. We just spent too long talking about them.
Well, we could just do a watch along of all of the races, to be honest.
Yeah, a good 20 hours.
Live stream it.
Exactly, we'll get everyone watching that. So we'll talk about that next week, along with some other stuff. But as you said, we have listed our three, not necessarily three strongest or three best or three most interesting, just three really impressive riders from both that maybe surprised both of us. Who have you got for the men, Owen?
So I've already mentioned George Kimber. The other two here, I've got James McKay, who again is a rider that has come through from last year, has developed. We've seen him having a standout ride last year, and now having that sort of level of ride consistently throughout the entire season. I think he's the sort of rider that you could see him progressing even further than he is now. He's certainly winning these races in the future. And the other one is, I would almost put him as the strongest rider in the country, is Matt Holmes. When it comes to road races, he's struggling because he is such a big target. okay, Matt moves, I've got to be on his wheel. Because if you don't mark that wheel, he's gone. He's going to win the race. But I think he did an incredible job coming back, racing on his own, having not raced for a long time, left the sport behind him, and come back and winning his first race, and then top tens across the board was quite impressive.
Good top three. I've also got George Kimber. I don't think you can have a top three. I don't think anyone can have it without him. But for the other two or three, I've cheated a little bit. I've gone Tom Williams as my second place.
Ooh.
So he was quite late into the sport. I did race him at the start of the year at Mountbatten, and he was very strong. He kind of went away on his own, and there was like 4 or 5 of us trading turns, going full gas, and we weren't bringing him back. And then he did eventually kind of gave up, came back to us, and then I think he just won anyway by attacking at the end. And then he went on, obviously, in the year to win Rydale on Scott Redding's team. After almost not having a team for this year, I know he was kind of in between different teams, so hopefully he gets snapped up by a bigger team for next year. I'm not sure what he wants to do next year, but he can kind of do anything he wants, really. And then for third, I've got Ollie Reese and Bain Granger as a joint
gone for a joint.
Foreign riders, well, British foreign riders coming back to the UK, racing on their own, and impressively winning. I think you kind of got to give them props. They're not racing these races in like every week. Do you agree with that, Owen?
Yes. I think that I like your point right at the end there that they're not racing it every week, and people underestimate how much that affects your chances of winning. You, especially if you're coming back as a marked rider, your kit's going to stand out. People know who you are. They're looking out for you. And then you're not really sure what the ebb and flow is right now. You're not sure like what the meta of the British scene is at that time. And, they still come back and they still win. It shows some class and shows how strong they are.
Yeah, just super impressive from those guys. Over in the women, I've got Ailey Shaw, obviously.
No-brainer.
Young rider, winning the overall. Second, I've got Lucy Harris, leading it for so long. She was also quite a late comer into cycling, and just every year has improved steadily. She moved mid-season to Pro Noctis. Finish line race team, that's what they're called, aren't they?
Yeah.
To do the Tour of Britain while she was leading. Didn't quite hang on to it, but always super consistent, always in the top 10, apart from maybe 1 or 2 races. And then the third, I've got Eleanor King after her Cycle Classic win. I think anyone that wins Cycle Classic has got to deserve some sort of recognition there. Who have you got on your 3, Owen?
So I've, it goes without saying I've got Ailey Shaw up there as well. She's probably best women's rider in the country this year. But then I've got Frankie Hall, who I almost oscillate between loving her and then despairing. She's so strong, and on her day she is almost unstoppable, and we saw that with Lancaster and Otley. If she reins in that early attacking nature, I think she'll be almost unstoppable. And then thirdly, I've got a bit of a wild card, Robin Clay. Now I say she's a wild card because obviously she won Curlew Cup, she won Lancaster last year. Sorry, not Lancaster, Lincoln last year. But she's young, and I think she struggled with. She broke a collarbone as well. Like, she's not had an easy, straightforward run at it, but she still comes up trumps, and she's still, you put her in a sprint at the end of a hard race, and I'm not going to bet against her. That's for sure.
No, I think I think there's a lot of riders you could put on that list.
Yeah. Why do you look constipated when you do that?
I don't like my brain takes a second to like think of something to say. I really try hard not to like use filler words.
Because you want to be able to cut it, don't you?
Yeah, I don't want to be like I don't want to use filler words anyway. So that's what I'd rather say nothing. It kind of works, but then I just do that sometimes.
No, it's good. It's good.
So that was the National Road Series of 2024. If you want to listen to us talk about the Crit Series, which was equally as entertaining, just on races that are an hour long around city centres, around Ilkley, Otley. Where else were they? Sheffield,
Yeah.
Guildford. I can't remember the other ones.
All over the place, as long as it's in the north.
Come back next week. Cyclocross happened this weekend. The first national trophy national race, whatever it's called. You were there. I was not there. I'm not a cyclocross guy. You are a cyclocross guy because you are always out there watching them.
Yep.
What was Derby like?
Derby, I would say, is one of the best courses on the National Trophy Series. It's pretty flat. It's in the middle of Derby, so you get some like good atmosphere. You get some people come along. You have a drier course that's fast. 2 big flyovers, they're like scaffolding flyovers. Some hurdles that always break some ankles.
What is a flyover, Owen?
So this is like a big scaffold bridge that's been built. Like, no, it's not going over anything. It's just like, hey, we need an extra obstacle. At Derby, the best thing about it was that I think it was Oscar Amy, the junior Open winner, was using that as an opportunity to get some air with some amazing tail whips. Basically, if you've got good legs, it's a perfect place to show off. So Derby was really nice. So the big story at Derby was that Anna Kay, the national champion, who races out in Europe most of the way through the year, head-to-head with Alderney Baker, who was like the homegrown local rider. Her team was even putting on the race, Team Impeller. Head-to-head sprint, 2 up, Alderney Baker takes it. So Anna Kay, you would normally have expected her to take that win, but Alderney Baker played an absolute blinder. It was actually 3 riders coming into the final lap. Zan Kreese was there as well from Team Spectra Racing, who I rated last week and put them kind of on my riders to watch list. And for a moment you thought that she might take the win. She attacked with like half a lap to go and then unfortunately crashed. So it was like a round of upsets and of like incredible tension in the women's race. In the open race, Thomas Mean all the way. He is by far and away the strongest cyclocross rider in the country right now. The big thing to watch will be when Cam Mason comes back for the national championships, most likely, and how they fare against each other. But I remember chatting to, I think it was Toby Barnes beforehand. I was like, are you gonna win? How is it gonna go? And it's just like, yeah, Tom's here, isn't it? So I don't see anyone beating him on the series this year. It will be interesting is whether anyone can beat him one-on-one, head-to-head in a round. I'm hoping that the Spectra guys can do that. Toby Barnes and Dan Barnes. Given the right circumstances, given the right course, they can probably give him a good run for his money, but he's just so strong. So it was a really good race, but the takeaway is that on the open side, Thomas Mean's the man to beat. On the women's side, everything's to play for. It's going to be a good season.
Thank you very much for watching and listening to our second episode of the Monument Cycling Podcast. Get ready for a whole winter of us chatting absolute cycling, road cycling, cyclocross cycling, all of that stuff. Next week we'll talk about criteriums that happened this year that we didn't talk about this podcast. We'll talk about Rob Scott, Matt Bostock, the giants of the UK crit scene. We'll also talk about Monument Cycling's own Cambridge Criterium, organised by our very own Owen Lake, the social media mogul that is Monument Cycling. But yeah, thanks for listening, Owen.
Take us away. Thank you so much, man. Thank you very much for chatting as always. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate it. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, throw some insults our way. Heckle, it's fine. We can take it. And if you're just listening, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.